According to an absolute bombshell story dropped by the Wall Street Journal, a billionaire COO of one of the largest German tech startups is actually a Russian spy. Just how did all of this happen? How credible are these allegations? And what does it mean for Russia and for Europe going forward? I'm Paul, U.S. Army combat veteran. Let's talk about it. So this is coming to us from the Wall Street Journal. The person in question is named Jan Marsalek, and Marsalek is or was the CEO of Wirecard. Now, Wirecard is interesting because it was considered for a time the only German mega tech startup, right? Germany has a very industrial economy. They have very high level manufacturing capabilities, but what they've never had is a Silicon Valley success. And like a lot of times when you have something that you want very much, when a facsimile appears, everyone sort of ignores the warning signs. And that seems to be the case for this company of Wirecard. Now, Wirecard got its start as a payment processing firm something like 10 years ago, where they've specialized in, no kidding, gambling and pornography sites. They would do the payment processing, right? Taking credit card numbers and actually moving the money into the purchaser's account. And over time, Wirecard grew to become one of the largest payment processors in Europe. And they claimed they had a special proprietary algorithm that allowed them to do business at smaller, more efficient margins than any of their competitors. But the reality was they actually were just committing fraud, producing fake accounts for their auditors to make it appear like they actually were flush with cash, when in fact they were not only broke, but they were losing money fast to actually Jan Marsalek himself. Now, Marsalek is a 40-something-year-old Austrian man who is noteworthy because while he was a billionaire at one point, thanks to his ownership stake in Wirecard, he never came from the sort of elite class within Germany, right? There's definitely some old money within Germany, and he wasn't with them. So he oftentimes would exaggerate a bunch of claims about himself and things he had done, and most people just kind of rolled their eyes, especially when he would say things like that he was secretly tied in with all these intelligence services, that he had access to classified documents, that he did work for the German BND, their equivalent of the CIA. And, most people thought that this was just an insecure dude talking out his behind. But in fact, he may have been completely truthful with them. Now, here is what I thought was one of the most interesting parts about Jan's history, is that Jan actually never got a college degree. He was just sort of a natural, BSer, and worked his way into Wirecard, which again, it's got its start as a pretty sketchy payment processor. But the question is really, how does this guy become a Russian agent? And the answer is, it may have just been the family business. Marsalek's grandfather, Hans Marsalek, was a member of the Austrian resistance against German occupation and later suspected of being a spy for the Soviet Union. And of course, at age of 19, Marsalek Jr. founded an e-commerce software company, but started working for Wirecard in 2000. Rising over the course of 10 years to become the firm's COO and an executive on the committee. But what is so strange about this is that, usually when someone gets recruited by a foreign intelligence service, they are able to sort of get their claws into you by one of three ways. The first is a grievance, right? Someone who feels hard done by their home country. So, for example, let's say someone is a high-level government employee, but they really don't like the U.S.'s stance on the war in Israel. Like, they really don't like it. Foreign government may approach them and say, hey, I understand you really don't have faith in the corrupt American government. Would you like to earn some money by turning over intelligence to us against them, right? The other way that they often get recruited is because of personal desperation. Oftentimes, these are people who maybe had high incomes or simply developed lifestyle or expenses that they can no longer sustain. A medical bill, an opiate addiction, a gambling problem, a very expensive divorce. Any of these things that can put somebody in dire financial situations where they feel like the walls are closing in on them. Oftentimes, intelligence services will find those people and say, hey, we can bail you out of this. Let us help you. All right, you give us some intelligence and we compensate you with enough money to fuel your addiction or get you out of this expensive situation or keep up the fake lifestyle that you've been trying to trick people. Whatever it is, but then there's a third way. There's a third way you can catch people. And this is appeal to their ego. And that sounds like what happened with Marsalek, right? These are oftentimes people who feel insecure about what they are doing. Maybe let's say you're a high-level government official, but in a very boring bureaucratic role, and you always dreamed of being a spy, or you always felt like you never really lived up to your full potential. A foreign government will come to you and say, hey, we see that you're special. You're a special guy. You're not like all these other people. We want you to be a double agent. And they go, oh, a double agent like James Bond. Yeah, that's going to be me. And these people are idiots. The reason is because their ego blinds them to the fact that they should be making a lot of money. If you're going to betray your country, and you shouldn't, you should do so in ways that hedge risk. Now, actually, I'll say this. Marsalek seems to have come out on top of all this, right? Personally, right? In addition to betraying his country and dishonoring himself, though certainly didn't dishonor his family name, because again, his dad sold his country out to the Soviet Union. So, he's really just following in his footsteps. But Marsalek seems to have gotten off with a ton of money in addition to fueling his ego, his pathological need to feel special relative to his peers. And the thing that also makes him weird is that according to some reports, he didn't really hide it. He would tell people at dinner parties, yeah, I'm deeply involved in the world of intelligence. I am always involved. I'm always doing things sort of off the books through my shady companies. He actually reportedly had a bust of President Vladimir Putin in his office and repeatedly traveled to even places like Palmyra, Syria, where he told people he was a guest of the Russian military. So it was not really like a secret that this dude was connected. But what did Russia get out of this relationship with a high-end payment processor? Well, here's where things get even stupider, right? Yeah, it just keeps getting weirder. So as you can imagine, if you're Germany, German intelligence has a real vested interest in spying on Russia for obvious reasons. They're their biggest geopolitical rival and a massive threat right on their border. And so to mitigate this threat, right? Germany routinely has clandestine intelligence agents. Well, the problem with intelligence agents, right, is that they have to do the same things you and I do, right? They buy an airplane ticket, they book a hotel, they, buy dinner, they will, have a suit made. And all of these things that they do, right, the ebb and flow of daily life, you oftentimes need a credit card. Right? You ever tried to you can't book an airline ticket with cash. You can't pay cash for a hotel. And it would look honestly sketchier if you did it. The problem is payment processors, legitimate ones like Square or PayPal, they say, listen, no, you can't, we will not work with one country's intelligence service because we might be doing business in your rival country. And so these payment processors will say, listen, we can't partner with the German BND to, have credit cards issued to your intelligence service employees, except of course for Wirecard. Wirecard, when the BND was looking for someone to handle payment processing for their agents, they said, sure, we're happy to take your accounts, which really should have been a red flag. Really, guys? If no one else wants to touch you and then the porn and gambling people say, yeah, we'll do your payment processing. No, really didn't raise a single red flag. Absolutely preposterous. So what of course happened is that Marsalek, right, he began to actively recruit these government officials. And then he would pass the information to Russia, detailing who was traveling, who from the BND appeared to be moving in and out of Russia, what they were spending money on, and generally trying his best to unmask these agents. Now, oftentimes there was like a final, he wouldn't have access to their real identities, but you can learn a lot. I mean, how much could someone learn about you if they had access to every one of your transactions? That's the kind of information that Russia was able to get access to on the German BND. Now, that wasn't all Marsalek was doing, right? As if unmasking, clandestine agents in your country wasn't enough. Marsalek also ran his own spy ring, right? A team of Bulgarians who were linked to Russia was actually managed by Marsalek himself operating out of the UK. And it's actually believed that his spy ring may have been linked to the poisonings that took place in the UK in 2018, right? And Russia may have wanted to use Marsalek because he was a good intermediary, right? He was an international businessman. He had access to a lot of wealth that could help protect and facilitate this ring of spies. He also had a legitimate reason to be traveling internationally and was almost too powerful to be subject to suspicion, hiding in plain sight, so to speak. It also may have served Marsalek's ego, who felt like a true spy master by running these sort of UK spy rings. But just the idea that it wasn't enough that he provided absolutely invaluable intelligence to the Russians, he also ran his own spy ring in a third country. And you may think, wow, you're both providing intelligence and gathering it. That surely must be enough. And for most double agents, it would be. But Marsalek took it one step further. As the Wagner Group was growing over this period from about 2010 to 2022, they needed financing. They needed funding. They needed the ability to payment process. And you can imagine being a shadowy armed mercenary group, legitimate payment processors aren't exactly clamoring to work with you. And so who did they turn to? Wirecard. Wirecard actually facilitated, allegedly, much of Wagner's operations in the African continent. So these allegations are just absolutely mind-blowing and appear to have taken place over the course of a decade, right? Now, Marsalek, unfortunately, it seems to have been an effective spy, but was not that effective of a businessman because Wirecard it fell apart in what basically amounts to a Theranos-level fraud. It was found that Wirecard, who claimed to have a special proprietary algorithm that gave them the competitive edge over other payment processors, actually just their competitive edge was their willingness to commit fraud. They would manufacture fake bank statements and transfer money into a series of accounts so that every time an auditor looked at the account, it appeared full. And when they would total up all the assets in all the accounts, they would say, oh, I'm making these numbers up, $1 million. But in fact, there was only $100,000 that was moved around 10 different accounts. And so this was an international ring of fraud that these guys were committing. And worse still is that when this scandal broke, Marsalek apparently took, some people think, tens of millions up to $1 billion and vanished into Russia. There's currently an Interpol notice seeking this guy, but just I can't tell you enough how absolutely insane this story is. The fact that he was just doing it so blatantly, right? He had, of course, Marsalek able to flee using just an absolute menagerie of passports, shell companies, houses held by random shell companies, just absolutely a shell game of trying to find who this guy is, where he was, what he was actually doing, right? So not only was he one of the biggest, most prolific spies in modern European history, he's also one of the biggest financial frauds in European history, with 1.9 billion euros in cash missing from Wirecard's balance sheet. Of course, their CEO, because remember, Marsalek, the COO, Marcus Braun, didn't get out in time and was charged with defrauding investors and other crimes. Of course, his lawyers said Braun had no knowledge of the intelligence-related activities by Marsalek, and the lawyers can't comment on whether spy agencies had accounts with Wirecard Bank. So just this, I think, the real question the real takeaway here is that we have to understand the scale of Russia's abilities, the ability of Russia to compromise a system, right? As much as I dunk on Russia for its terrible military tactics, and this has been a historic trend, Russia is comparably good at influence and intelligence operations, right? They understand at a highly sophisticated level that to penetrate a society and to obtain valuable information, right? The US thinks like if you want information at the Chinese government, for example, you target Chinese government officials, and it's a straight line, and it's very unsophisticated. The Russians understand that if you want to understand things about a foreign country, you can do so through cultural, industrial, technological venues, right? You can use money, you can use politics, you can use media and influence. They all work together. Russia's information operations is so sophisticated, and it's primarily because of the Soviet Union. When the Soviets took over Russia in the 1920s, they considered it a mandate, almost a religious calling to spread communism around the globe, which meant that, of course, Russia's the Red Army, the communist armies, sometimes in World War II, they marched through Europe and made countries communist, but they also tried to spread communism through cultural means, through diplomatic means, through industrial means, right? All these sort of vehicles and they became so good at these multi-decade efforts to just plant seeds and let the vines creep up through a society. So I guarantee it, Marsalek is not the only high-level industrialist compromised by Russia. He is not the only one who is spying for Russia within Europe. And this Russian strategy of compromising the extremely wealthy is extremely effective and bodes poorly for the Western Europe's ability to navigate the Ukraine crisis. Anyway, guys, if you're interested in crushing your New Year's resolutions, hopefully it's not to spy on your country. Hopefully it's more wholesome, like mine, like work out or lose weight. You want Strike Gum. Strike Gum has 0 sugar, 90 milligrams of caffeine in every piece, and of course, comes in a refreshing mint flavor. It's superior to an energy drink in every way, despite having all the caffeine of an energy drink in just this little piece. So if you're interested in a secret weapon to crush your New Year's resolutions, go to strikegum.com and get some today. Okay, that is all I had. Thank you, guys. See you in the next one.